So we've talked a little bit about M. Night Shyamalan, and that not a lot of his movies have had great endings, or maybe they haven't performed super well at the box office. Do you think there's such a thing as like a one-hit wonder director? I know we see this a lot in the music industry, but is it possible that that's what he is?
I don't know if he's like a one hit wonder necessarily. I think, in terms of like, if you think about a film completely, like from beginning, middle to end, climax, perfect ending, etc., then potentially he's only made one quote unquote perfect film. So that's like a one hit wonder perfect film. But he has had hits, right? Like Split was quite popular, and
Mm-hmm.
Unbreakable, not as well known, but like I think most people enjoyed it. So I think, I don't know if he's like a one hit wonder, but he isn't like the top of like creating masterpieces all the time. Like they're not masterpieces, but they're not total fails.
Yeah, I just think it's interesting that like Sixth Sense was so widely acclaimed. Like I think it had some Oscar, maybe not wins, but like nominees at least. Um, and that was so early on in his career, right? I think that was like his second or third movie. And it had a huge budget as well. And then since then, he's just never made anything that has come close in terms of critical acclaim and even popularity. Like, yes, Split is popular, even like Signs with Joaquin Phoenix, that one was super popular. But I don't think anything has come close to Sixth Sense.
Yeah, that's totally true. So I guess, like, do we classify one hit wonders as people who just never get funded after one or two films? Or do we classify one hit wonder as like, that one was like the perfect film and did really well, i.e. The Sixth Sense, and then the other ones have just been mediocre? Because like, I kind of feel like if we compare it to the music industry, usually the way that the music industry goes is you have like this really amazing song that does maybe really well for a year or 2 years, and then they try to release another one the year after, but then it flops, and then that artist is like never heard from again. So that's what I associate with one hit wonder. But then for film, I feel like it's different, especially for the career that M. Night Shyamalan has had. Like, he's been able to really ride on the curtails of The Sixth Sense. Like, he's made a lot of films just from The Sixth Sense, just from the success of The Sixth Sense. So, and they're not bad. Like, the concepts are really strong. The endings, again, like, TBD, but still, like, I don't see that as like one hit wondery.
Yeah, I saw The Village a long time ago. I want to say like when I was in high school or something like that. And this was before I think I'd ever heard his name. I don't think I had seen The Sixth Sense by this point, but I saw a trailer or I had heard someone talk about it or something. And I was just so intrigued that I was like, I need to watch that movie. I think my mom was probably like, oh, he doesn't make very good movies. I don't think that's supposed to be very good. Like, I remember just going in at first having really high expectations, and then someone tempered my expectations by being like, I think this is bad. Maybe my mom had seen it. I don't remember specifically what it was. But, yeah, it's super interesting concept because basically it takes place in this village that's, like, kind of old-fashioned. And there's, like, monsters out there which keep taking people, and so the people in the village have to live very like careful lives where they're, whenever there's like a bell ringed, they all have to go like hide in their houses. And I thought it was so interesting, and I wanted to figure out like what the monster was. It kind of seemed like a monster film, a mystery. And then the actual explanation, I was like, what? Like, this doesn't make sense. Like, I was just very disappointed. And so I think ever since I saw that movie, I was like, okay, I'm not into this guy's movies. I don't think that they're very good, which is why when I saw Split, I was like so interested initially because I thought it was really good, and then I just didn't like the ending. But I feel like I've only seen 4 of M. Night Shyamalan's movies, and he's done probably like a dozen or 2 dozen, and I don't know. I don't know if I'll stay interested. I'll definitely keep watching his trailers because super interesting concepts, but I'm just a little bit disappointed and surprised that he keeps getting funded, honestly.
Well, I think we were talking about this maybe a couple episodes back, that some of his films I personally feel like might be better off as like short films, because the concept's so strong that potentially you can be more experimental with the ending, or just in general create a very strong, because I think short films also are, in terms of a story structure, they don't follow traditional storytelling where there's like a beginning, middle, and the end being a conclusion. Some short films just kind of like end like between the middle and ending, and I think maybe that's his genre. Like maybe he can make short films great again, or if they ever were.
Yeah, it would be really interesting to see someone alter his film and just like cut out the ending or something. You know what I mean? Like, do you think Old would have been better if, I haven't seen it, but whatever kind of like explanation they gave for what happened in the movie, if they just didn't include that and they just like cut it off so that you knew the concept but you didn't know like the reasoning for it or why it happened, would it have been stronger?
I kind of feel like no, because it's such a long, like it wasn't, I think it must have been like 2 hours or like 2 and a bit, but so it's like a very like normal length, but because a narrative film is usually quite long, to sit through all of that and not feel like you know why or like understand what was going on, it feels a bit like, oh come on, like I just want to know what's going on. I mean, it's definitely exciting, but it wouldn't be satisfying. Whereas, like, I think short films, because the maximum, I think, is, like, 40 minutes, then you don't necessarily need the ending because you're not sitting there for, like, ages waiting for a resolution, if that makes sense. But I guess, like, that's my perspective. And I guess the question also is, do satisfying movies or do amazing movies necessarily need an ending, potentially? Because if you think about, again, the traditional story structure, like you do have that ending because it makes the story satisfying, but maybe a story being not satisfying is just sometimes better because that's just a better portrayal of real life. Like life never just like ends so concretely in like 2 hours.
Yeah, like if something bad happens, you don't necessarily get a reason for why it happened.
Yeah.
I think a good comparison to this is the movie Bird Box, because in it there's, you know, this big issue. Basically there's like some kind of monster who exists. We think we never get to see the creature, so we don't actually know anything about them. And the whole movie you're like, why are these monsters here now? Like what happened? Why is it that when people see them, they go crazy and they kill themselves? Like the whole movie you're wondering what the reasoning is, and it never actually gives you that reason. Like it doesn't give you an explanation for what these monsters are, what they look like, anything like that. And I think that's really interesting because the whole time you're expecting an explanation to be given, but it's not. And because of that, I think it's actually kind of a stronger ending because they could have given an explanation, or they could have shown in the movie like what these creatures actually look like, but it's almost scarier because we don't know, because there is that like unknown element to it.
Was the movie still satisfying? Like I wonder which aspect of that movie made the movie still feel satisfying after you watched it, like when the credits were rolling, because the fact that you like actually enjoyed it means that there was some sort of resolution, right? Like you stood by it for like 2 hours. Something must have happened at least. I mean, you don't have to tell me because obviously I haven't watched it, and maybe some other people haven't watched it, but I think maybe that's the trick. Like you don't need the explanation for like why things happen that way or why things are occurring that way, but at least maybe like someone escaping is enough of a resolution, even if we don't understand what they're escaping from.
And I think there's probably some people out there who weren't satisfied with the ending. They were like, I wanted to see what the monsters looked like. I want to know the mystery behind them. And so maybe some people weren't satisfied. But to me, it's not worth risking that ending by having the writer of the story write a, like, you know, terrible ending just in case it wasn't in case it wasn't satisfying, I would rather end and not actually know.
Yeah.
So,
another great concept was like A Quiet Place then, because again, we don't know where these creatures came from. We just know
in the second one there is a little bit more background to them, but it doesn't like ruin it or anything, because I feel like in A Quiet Place we know a little bit more from the beginning. We actually see what the monsters look like in the first one, so it's not as much of a mystery.
Yeah. But I think in general, A Quiet Place also, it's not like where they come from or like why they're there, etc. They just are there, and then Emily Blunt and John Krasinski are just trying to like manage their lives, and they happen to find ways to improve their life, i.e. like, oh, like if they're just really, really quiet, they can still live.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to compare these different movies. I wonder what M. Night Shyamalan thinks of Bird Box and movies like it where there actually isn't an explanation. Hopefully he gets inspired by them and is like, wow, maybe I don't need to give a movie an ending. I think what you suggested, having his movies be shorts and not having that ending, I think that's a great suggestion. You should talk to him.
Anyone have his deets?
We'll be in touch.